So, insofar as our legal system affirms that what has taken place is an expropriation, I think the arbiters will accept that as authoritative of the situation. However, Your Honor, we cannot just fashion a unique manner of compensation arising from this expropriation. The ICSID and the ICC will measure up the compensation standards with the international standards for expropriation. And if that compensation standard does not conform, then the arbiters will impose the international standard. And that standard is full restitution and recovery. The government will be deemed to have expropriated Fraport's investment in the same blink of an eye, because that is the natural and logical consequence of expropriating the terminal. In the same blink, the Republic rendered Fraport's investment useless. And under the treaty between Germany and the Philippines, Fraport is entitled to full recovery. So, Your Honors, it looks like the claims of Piatco and Fraport are $500 million each, and the government will have to pay $1 billion for a terminal that only cost $350 million, more or less. The amount is much higher than what the court's understanding was in Agan, when the court stated the amount of 13 billion pesos. And that's because, for example, Fraport's investment will be deemed expropriated. Now, that investment is the notes, debts, equities that Fraport holds. It will be entitled to full recovery under the bilateral investment treaty with Germany and the Philippines. And apart from treaty, the existing generally accepted principles of international law on expropriation. Now, the big difference between the two, Your Honor, is the underlying premise in an expropriation. Between an expropriation and other actions that have the effect of compensation or payment, for example, like quasi-contracts after a voided government contract, is that in expropriation, there is no prior relationship between the government and the party. Now, the object of the expropriation had not anticipated any relationship with the government, and it's actually an innocent party just standing by the wayside who is suddenly forced to sell his property. And that is the reason why, Your Honor, the compensation standard for expropriation is full recovery or market value. Now, the standard in quasi-contracts is different, just as the situation we have is different. Piatco had always known that this building was being constructed for the government. And under the BOT law, there are only 3 variations of the BOT law which permit the proponent to be the owner. This is not one of them. And so the owner of that building has always been anticipated to be the government, with Piatco having a claim perhaps only for compensation or payment, quantum meruit. The difference in voided government contracts is this. Apart from there being a prior existing relationship, Your Honor, the party contracting with government has the burden of compliance. That is the basic principle in government contracting, is that the burden of compliance is placed on the private entity rather than on the public entity. So when a contract is voided, the restitution or the recovery focuses not on the private entity, but on the benefit received by the government. So, for example, in expropriation, the compensation standard favors the party against whom the expropriation was taken, because he was innocent. In the aftermath of a voided government contract, the law has to favor the government. And that is why the compensation standard only begins with reimbursement, because the focus is on the benefit actually received by the government. In the context of this case, what government should be liable for would only be the benefit that government would receive. and that would really be only costs directly attributable to the structure. Unfortunately, if we carry on with expropriation, the standard will be different. The standard of compensation will be full compensation, full recovery. And we cannot fashion this out of context, Your Honor, because just compensation has a specific technical meaning. So the proper action that should have been taken for the government was to examine, in the aftermath of the voided government contract, what the relationships between the parties are, Your Honor. Now, I have 2 minutes left, Your Honor. Much of what is in here I can put in writing, but may I just end, Your Honor, by saying this. There is sufficient jurisprudence in other states about what happens in a voided government contract. If it's an honest mistake, there is reimbursement quantum merit. If there is corruption that intervened, there is no recovery and no set-off. And I have submitted that in my comment, Your Honor. The government, Your Honor, is in possession of evidence, and I'm not talking about petty corruption. I'm not talking about facilitation fees.